David Kabeberi is an advisor with the Tugutuke movement, and Judie Wangu is also an advisor with the Tugutuke movement. Thank you very much for joining us, David and Judie. Karibuni sana. It's Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you very much for having us here.
You say asante, Judie.
Thank you for having us.
It's a whole purpose. When someone tells you karibu, you don't just say. When you hear that proverb, Judie, from Malawi, when you're crossing over a river, you might be eaten by crocodiles, but don't let yourself be bitten by the small fish. What comes to mind?
What comes to mind is don't bother the small issues, you know, like it kind of also sounds like usually you have bigger fish to fry, like you have bigger things to worry about than the small things.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Yes.
Is that the same thing you think of, David?
Well, for me, being an accountant, I transfer to the money side and say, look after the pennies, and the pounds will look after themselves.
Right.
That is a good... Say again.
So look after the pennies.
And now you've introduced a new accountancy proverb. So can you just translate it?
Chunga mapeni, mapesa
Yatajichunga. Don't let yourself be bitten by the small fish. All right? As you're there wondering about the crocodiles, take care of the small ones. And the big ones will also take care of themselves. Of course, if you're making sure that you're not bitten by the little fish, you're also watchful for the crocodile. I think that's a good one. Thank you very much, David. And on that note, tell us about the Tugutuke movement. What is it about?
Eric, the Tugutuke movement, and as you see in the title, I'm really just the advisor, is an effort by very young people. Started around November last year, when it became clear that there was a serious increase in the apathy towards voting. And these young people were concerned that if we are giving up on voting, are we giving up on the country? And whose country is it anyway? And so they began to speak amongst themselves. This is a group of about 20 people, including Judie here. They range from age of 22 to 35, thereabouts. So they are the ones we call
very young people.
Very young people. Youthy. I myself am young. It's just I've got a little more experience than most other people. And so they began to talk amongst themselves, what can we do? Should we leave it or should we begin to take an action ourselves? And in the conversations, they were able to conclude or maybe determine that a lot of the problems that we have in terms of political leadership in the country comes from the inability to hold MPs and MCAs, the representatives, accountable to a point where we now sort of almost acknowledge that we elect people to go and eat. And we actually do it. We wake up in the morning and we go and elect so-and-so to go and eat.
And hopefully they'll share something with us.
They do, once every 5 years.
Yes.
A little bit of it. And in fact, there is a study that shows that the average spend for people running for MP is 35 million shillings. So I suppose in that 35 million is the sharing, but it's obviously a small drop in the big ocean. So their quest then was, how do we achieve this accountability? Recognizing that in the way, and it's very hard for even young people because we don't all understand the new constitution and what it means. And I'm calling it new, and it is 2010. But for a lot of people, constitution at all is new.
Yep.
Most people haven't read it, haven't understood it, and understand government from the way it is presented to them by MPs, MCAs, the president, and everybody. So the realization that, in fact, the important person in our political life is the MP and the MCA is a bit hard. I think the 2010 Constitution deliberately gave very little power to the president and transferred most of the power to the assemblies, to the National Assembly and the County Assembly. This concept wasn't properly put out to people. We think that the president and the minister and the treasury own the budget. The budget belongs to the parliament, and parliament owns it on behalf of the people. It is the parliament that determines what should be done, and in doing so, parliament represents the citizen, the owner of the money, the taxpayer. So we pay tax, then we say to the parliament, go and have this money spent in this way.
Make sure it is spent well.
Yes. And so they allocate the money, they call it appropriate. But yesterday I was watching a TV, a show, I think it had 2 MPs on it. And there was a quarrel as to whether when the government uses the money for a different thing, whether it's misappropriation or whether it's misapplication. But they appropriate this money and say, please use this money for this purpose. And then the other function of parliament is to ensure it is used for that purpose.
Yes.
What we call the oversight. Again, representing the people. And then there is the function of creating law, which is really determining how do we behave towards one another. And again, that is something that you can only do representing people, because it is us who agree on what the law should be. Now, what has happened over time is that when the MPs are not accountable to their voters, it gives them the opportunity to follow their own interests. It means that they can follow their own interests, whether it is going into bed with the executive, so that then the oversight is reduced. Going to bed with the executive, so that in fact the programs that the parliament is approving are the executive's programs, and eventually allowing even the executive to usurp power.
Parliament itself.
And other powers. Excuse me. So you saw recently the BBI ruling was very significant in saying that the president cannot commence a popular change to the constitution.
That is a function that has been given to the citizen.
Yes.
And it's a right of the citizen. And the president, by being president, is not mwananchi wa kawaida. It's not Wanjiku. Let's bring in Judie into the conversation. A very good introduction of how the very young people, according to David Kabeberi, came together and they started asking themselves the questions, and then you came up with the answer on Tugutuke. So why Tugutuke?
Like he said, it's common knowledge that we've decided to be, the youth especially has decided to be apathetic, and they've decided they no longer want to deal with the government, which is actually doing a disservice to ourselves, so to say. So we thought that it is about time we take our country back from the political elite, the 3,000 or so people who have decided will be the one who decides for us. So I'm urging the youth not to give up. We still have a chance. Using the ballot, we can still take our country back.
Do you think there is adequate interest from younger people or the younger people to see that government is put in place that then is going to make sure that their needs, livelihoods protected, needs met, life secured? Do you think there's adequate interest to push that particular agenda from the youth, who we're always told is the larger percentage of the population?
Yeah, I think there is, because then these conversations will not be happening, because what is happening even on the social media, you find we are constantly complaining about what is not happening. But we don't have a solution. We don't have a mechanism of making these people accountable and have them work for us like they're supposed to. So, yeah, I think there's interest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is the call to be more active in the political processes, or is the call to present yourselves as candidates to then sit in positions of leadership?
It's to both. To both. Because growing up, we kept being told how we are the leaders of tomorrow. For me, I feel tomorrow is here. It's about time we take charge. We position ourselves, so that we are able to take the country to the next level. Yeah.
What do you think, David, even going now towards August, are activities then that need to happen, or that younger people that are currently involved in towards this agenda, clearly that's being pushed now?
And before I answer that, I have to just pick up that Eric and I also belong to a generation which was the leaders of tomorrow. Tomorrow is still coming.
It's not yet.
Yes, but I mean, right now, we have to recognize that there has been very strong political activity for the last 3 years, maybe 4 years. And that activity has been around the presidency. And it's much of that activity that creates the impression that the big thing to worry about is who are we electing
as president?
As president? Who is this one guy, Messiah, coming to sort out all of us? And then, it's open secret that everybody's wondering whether the front runners, either of them, are that Messiah. But what we are really saying is that it really ought not to matter that much which of the messiahs is elected if the system below them,
If the disciples
are discipling, are working, are delivering the bread. Because if Parliament is doing its oversight role and representing the people and being an institution that actually is looking at the interests of the people as a whole, then the president can only be sobered. If the system works at some place where the president is a bad president, it will stop.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the parliamentary independence or oversight, then a bad president will go bad all the way. So what needs to happen now is for us and other Kenyans to wake up and realize that we really need to be deliberate about who we are electing as MPs, as MCAs. The MCAs are also very important because remember they are the ones who are on the ground. But also remember that the current allocation of budget to the counties is only 15%. So there is 85% that is looked after by this smaller assembly called the National Assembly, which has 290 plus about 80 MPs. So they both are important at their levels. And we need to move towards recognizing the importance of that and get Kenyans to agree to actually deliberately examine who are you voting for. If you ask most Kenyans, and I've done this, and I deliberately do this all the time, I ask them, who is your MP? Who did you vote for?
Yep.
And most people say, I actually don't know.
Right.
I ticked a box with the right color.
Especially those in the urban areas.
Yes, because it's the 6 Ps and all that sort of stuff. But I'm happy to say that we are finding also in talking with people that they are recognizing this what we are saying. And now most people are saying we are not going to vote 6 Ps anymore. We do want to see who is our MP. But what is the mechanism by which it can make a difference? The other thing that we need to think about is how do these MPs, how are they supposed to be accountable to the people? And the Constitution created a political system that depended on political parties, so that the political parties which belong to the people or should belong to the people nominate MPs, and it is these MPs who then push the party agenda in the House. And there was provision for those parties to be strong, democratic and independent organizations. The same MPs have made small little changes to the Constitution that have enabled them to own
The parties.
So that now it is their party.
It's not a members' party.
No.
It is a leaders' party.
Yes. And it's often owned by one or two people.
Yeah.
And the result then is that, they can't look to the parties to be the ones managing the MPs. And so Tugutuke is actually offering to manage MPs and MCAs who agree in writing, in a pledge to the people, to honestly and truly represent the people.
Okay.
And they will send a pledge to do so. The pledge is not about building roads and things like that, because it's not the MP's job to build a road or a school. Neither is it the president's, incidentally, to go and decide that the road from here to here will be repaired tomorrow, because I'm very upset that my friend lives in a place where the road is not working. It's not his function. So
the pledge is that I will be accountable to the people.
Yes.
That put me in Parliament.
Yes.
And does the pledge have any mechanisms for what if I'm not accountable?
So the pledge is I'll be a true representative of the people and represent your wishes. I will meet with the people at least 3 times a year, so that we can exchange this what we are doing in Parliament and what would you like me to go and say. I will not be engaged in business with the government, and neither will I influence government business. That's things answering really to the Chapter 6 and integrity and things like that. And a few other things, including supporting the reforms that we need, because there are reforms that are necessary. Some of which were included in the BBI in terms of constitutional reform that were positive. I'm not going to comment about the others, but there are needs. There's need for reform. There is need to complete the implementation of the Constitution. There are some areas where we have been very shy about implementing. So we need these guys who are accountable to the people to also undertake to support people-led reform and implementation.
And this is a pledge to be signed by the candidates.
By the candidate.
As they're seeking your vote.
Yes.
And you're telling them, come and sign this pledge that you're going to be a good person. Should I give you my vote?
Yes. And if I'm not that good person, I will resign.
David, we're all laughing because, they will go in there. They even currently, the law requires them to sign even wealth declaration forms and all those things. And you shall be declaring your wealth every year. You shall be renewing this. But we know what happens.
It sounds like
a member of Parliament coming to promise you at what?
It sounds
Aki,
like I will. It sounds like a Jacob and Esau moment when Esau was so hungry and he said, "You know what? I'll give you this food if you sign over your birthright to me." At that point, all this fella is thinking is that he needs to eat.
Yes.
So he's going to sign he's going to give off everything. And he gave away his birthright, essentially. So it just sounds like it's at that moment where essentially what you're telling me is that you will give me your vote if I sign this thing.
Just this thing.
So you have to start with and I obviously can see the reason for the doubt. Yeah, and the one thing that we are saying is that probably none of the current MPs and MCAs would qualify to sign this pledge, because it also includes a statement that I have never been involved in anything that would bring question to my integrity. And they know it's a bit hard for them to sign it when it comes around to it. And people are asking, for example, if you listen to a lot of Bunge la Wananchi meetings, I watched one in Limuru East, where Wananchi asked the current MCA, at the time when the BBI was on the table, and it was on the table in the counties, in the county assemblies. Do you agree you are supposed to represent us? Yes. Do you agree you are supposed to take our views? Yes. Did you do so? No. The books were distributed. Did you receive 2 million shillings so that you could pass the BBI? Yes. So what did we get as the Wananchi? It will be very difficult for anybody to believe that any of the MCAs who passed or who demanded the grant before passing the BBI are going to be people who can sign that pledge and keep it. But the people we are looking at is a completely whole new set of...
So a new crop of leaders.
Completely new.
That will now come in with integrity. They'll come in and pledge that I'm going to represent the people. Yeah. I will live according to the ideals, spirit and letter of the Constitution and what the people expect of a representative in the National Assembly.
Yes.
And in the county assembly.
In the county.
And should I not do that,
I will resign. So remember, we are looking at supporting about 2,000 candidates.
Right.
The objective being to have at least one candidate in each of the 1,834 seats, and to move for a majority in each of the houses, the assemblies, national and county. Now, if you have a majority, that, and let's say you have 1,000 MPs and MCAs countrywide, if 10% of these people refuse to follow the pledge, you still have a large number of people who will still continue the objective and the cause.
Right.
These other 10% we will deal with, because what they sign as a pledge will be a contract. It will be a contract with Tugutuke.
Tugutuke.
And we have seen that we are actually able to take that contract to court. Yeah. It
So
will
it's enforceable.
It will be a nuisance, of course, because having to go to court and all that. And these people always produce some other section 22.5 of some other law which nobody knew about that produces a technical problem. But we will take it.
And are these individuals represented across parties? So obviously they need a vehicle through which they would then sit. So it doesn't matter what party these individuals who've then signed this contract then represent. Doesn't matter.
So on the parties, we spoke about the quality of parties. And I think we recognize that parties are very personal vessels and tools of individuals in politics.
Yeah.
If you are elected on a political party, you owe your allegiance to that party, and that party can dictate the way
you will operate.
You operate.
Yes.
It is therefore not possible for you to be directly responsible to the people if you are sponsored by a party. So we are looking at the people who will be kuwajibika candidates being independent.
Okay.
Let's take a break on this note. It's 8:30, Kenya's biggest conversation, live on KTN Home, SpiceFM and online. In the room with us this morning is Judie Wangu and David Kabeberi, advisors of the Tugutuke movement, which is saying, let citizens now take over the reins and power in terms of exercising the Constitution. We have the sovereign power. Can we determine who exactly leads us and represents us in our county assemblies and in the National Assembly? That is the conversation we're having. Keep it right here. We'll be back shortly.
This is the Situation Room.
And we're talking about, getting the youth to get excited and get involved in the next general election from whatever angle, from activism, from organizing, from mobilizing, from holding leaders accountable, from vetting the candidates that are coming and seeking the votes. And Judie, you said, well, the youth have for a long time felt, like they don't have a role to play in this. What is Tugutuke going to do to change that mindset? Because we saw, yes, the youth did not come out in the expected numbers to register as voters,
Yes.
but still the fact is the majority of the voters that are registered, the 20 million plus, are still youth. So what is it that Tugutuke is going to do to change this mindset of the youth that are registered as voters and even those that are not registered as voters to be active between now and August 9th?
So right now we are thinking of solutions, and we have already formed an assembly, which is on tugutuke.co.ke, where it's an all-round participation, where you can go and put your suggestions, your grievances, and what you hope to see in the government. And through the same platform, the kuwajibika candidates are able to see what is it that the people want. So it's a forum or a platform that brings all of us together. So if we are able to garner the kuwajibika candidates in the National Assembly, then I believe we can move forward from that.
And you're looking up, so are you just focusing on the National Assembly, or are you also including the Senate and the county assemblies?
Those as well, because they are, like we said, we start with the MCAs, the MPs, and the Senate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're looking at about 1,450 wards in the country, 47 senators, 47 women reps, 290 constituency MPs,
Yeah.
1,834. Is that correct,
That's
Mr.
correct.
Accountant?
Yes.
You've just been doing like...
In my opinion, that is correct.
So this is a very high number. And like you said, David, it's not looking at necessarily political party candidates, it's independent candidates. What's the likelihood? What is the target number of independent candidates that you hope to get? I'm sure you're working with targets. Our target is, if out of this 1,834, we get 1,000 candidates who sign up onto the Kuwajibika pledge, then we have a good stead.
We are looking for at least 50%. At least 50%.
What is 50% of 1834?
That's very hard to calculate.
917.
But it's 907.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you're right. that is a 50%, at least 50% win in the houses.
Okay.
So that we have majority in the houses. But in terms of the candidates running, we are looking to have at least 2,000, which means one for each seat.
One for each seat. Okay.
And if you're looking at, are there independent candidates of that number? In the last election, not last year, in the last year, this thing looks like it was the last year.
In 2017?
Maybe it's my age.
Yes, clearly.
Out of the 15,000 candidates, 4,000, about 600 were independent. So there will, and this year I would expect that there will be more independent candidates. So it won't be a question of whether we will find enough candidates. It will be a question of whether we will find enough candidates who will qualify in terms of the vet and the ability to engage with the pledge.
Okay. Obviously, there's something there's a solution that's being sought after here. Something is trying to be solved. And oftentimes I say that if you're trying to solve the problem, you have to look at what caused the problem in the first place. So why do you think then that there has not been this participation at the level to which we would like it to be concerning the young people up until this point in time? And it's across board, whether you want to look at what folks have called apathy when it comes to registration by youth to vote, whether it is participation, whether it is putting themselves up for candidacy, whatever it has been. What do you think has caused this problem?
I'll leave it for Judie because it is there.
Well, we feel that we are not represented, we are not involved, and we feel it's about time that we get there. The problem the problem is over time, these people have not been transparent, they have not been accountable, So we feel, what is the point? It is because of what those people have been doing, the political
those
elite.
Those people being the ones who are in positions of
right
leadership
now.
today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we feel they're not going to do anything anyway. We've had all those promises before and they never follow through. So now, Tugutuke, it is us sitting down and thinking, now, how do we make them accountable?
Okay.
What do we do about it?
Many folks then would ask, what is the guarantee that bringing in somebody who is vested, somebody then who has seen these things play out over the last 10 odd so years, now wants to get into the system, which many would argue corrupted the individuals who are those people today? What is the guarantee that younger people getting into the same system would not face the same problem?
I can help there. The Tugutuke is not saying that younger people have to be the leaders. And in fact, it's not saying younger people are better leaders. We are saying people who agree and pledge to be accountable are the people we need to elect, because they're going to represent us.
Sure.
In fact, this leadership thing where suddenly you get elected and you become mheshimiwa with the bells and whistles and helicopters escorting you, really ought to be a thing of, we need to get rid of that and have MPs, MCAs and senators who are mwakilishi, real representative. So it's not so much the trying to bring in new people into the same old bottle of wine,
Right.
but make them accountable. And they don't even have to be young, but they need to be accountable to the majority. And that majority of Kenyans is young.
Yeah.
So once you're accountable to the majority, you're actually being accountable to the young people. And when you're accountable to the young people and working for the young people, we will stop seeing what we have done nowadays, seeing the young people as a special interest group.
Yes.
I always wonder, how can the majority
Be a special
Be a
be a
interest
special interest group? It's because the
that
special
requires
interest
affirmative
group,
action.
yeah, it is us up here at our age, because we don't have to report to them. What we usually do is promise them
Yes.
goodies.
Yes.
Yeah, you will get jobs, you will get 6,000 bob, you will get maybe some other stuff like that.
The odd
But
200
we are
shillings
always
at a
promising
rally.
them, yes,
Yeah.
as special interest. But if this majority of people are the ones calling the shots by having elected people who report to them, then suddenly the special interest people become people my age who need support to survive. So the and I lost my train of thought as I was speaking.
The guarantee that once they are there, they are going to live by the ideals.
Yes, because they are not coming because they're young. They're coming because they have made the pledge.
Okay.
But the other thing we need to sort of keep in mind is that running good politics is not just getting right people to do the right thing. This is somebody who quoted this, and I found it a very powerful quote. It's about getting the wrong people and the right people to do the right thing. And if they don't do the right thing, then there must be punishment for not doing the right thing.
There are
Because we can
consequences for
spend
it.
a long time trying to say who are the right people.
Yes.
But it's just getting everybody
To do the right
to
thing.
do the right thing, and there be punishment for
Right.
doing the wrong thing.
David, the current situation where we're talking about the majority, the young people, very many people feeling disenfranchised, feeling disconnected with the politics, feeling let down by leadership, feeling let down by government. Is it an indictment on your generation, perhaps? Those that have been there before, those that the young people are looking up to, and they feel we have nothing to look up to. Is that an indictment on the older generation?
I feel it is. And for us, we would also induct our older generation because I think that in the last 50, 60, 70 years, we haven't dealt with succession of leadership. We haven't dealt with training younger people to take over responsibility. In the days before colonialism, and I'm not making an excuse here, but we did have cultural systems that ensured there was a deliberate succession. When this generation got older, this generation, there was ways in which it took over. But today, we haven't done that, and we haven't trained our young people generally as to be leaders. So now we are getting around creating leadership development training institutes and efforts like that, but they will only target a small number of the population, which means, again, we will get to a point where we are dependent on a small number of people, and the other people don't understand what the leadership requirements are. So, for sure, and on behalf of my generation, we accept the indictment, and the only thing to do now is to try and correct it.
And on the matter of accountability and leaders being in office and feeling that they ought to represent the people and they're answerable to the people that put them in office and doing their job as they ought to be doing their job. What role do you think the professional associations, the professions do play in this, in just taking a back seat. So, for instance, you say you're an accountant. You've been in this for many years in accounting, in audit. You have also participated in championing good leadership for many years. Now, if you look back and you see the kind of corruption that we've had, there's always going to be some auditor somewhere who sat back and let these things happen. Look at the number of lawyers, of accountants, of engineers that we have in the current National Assembly, and we are still pointing fingers and asking ourselves, what are we getting from this National Assembly? So the professional bodies such as ISPAC that you belong to, the Law Society of Kenya, the Architectural Association of Kenya, and others, have they let down the rest of the population by not being active?
I think by looking the other way, even perhaps within their own professional associations. I haven't studied this very much, but I would say that when in 2002, Yote Wezekana took over and we became, the Moi regime came to an end. There was a huge sense of success amongst Kenyans. That, okay, that bad regime has gone, so now we are in the right place. A lot of people dropped out of the fight because we have succeeded. And it was a very positive time when Kibaki was president the next 10 years. Then when eventually we got the new constitution, which if you remember was the subject from 1992, it took to 2010 to actually change the constitution to what we now call our liberation constitution. Again, there was a sense of success. And we are done. Really, we have done well, and now let's go and implement the constitution and live a happy life. And a lot of the people who were playing watch stopped watching. In fact, a lot of the civil society, which was very strong in the 20 years before, moved on to doing other civil society activities. And now we find ourselves where we are because we actually didn't keep an adequate watch on what happened in the implementation of that constitution.
Right.
We actually left the employees, the people who were employed by the constitution, to implement it. And of course, they implemented it as best as they thought for themselves. It's a natural thing. So one of the things that we would have to do, and when we're looking at Tugutuke, is not just at the elections in 2022. We are looking at reforms in the constitution and implementation of the constitution, and also bringing about culture and change. We have to actually bring people around to think positively, to come out of thinking that you have to be corrupt to survive.
True. Do you think that there's enough engagement or involvement with the electoral process, or even with education about government and how leadership works? And then to say that maybe some of the problems that we see later on is because there was not intimate knowledge or, activation with the system and how it works. And our colleague CT often says that perhaps as young as primary school is when we need to start to inculcate some of these things. Because we see other countries, other societies whereby there's no question. You're involved in the process. You're making demands of the smallest unit of governance in your area. They know who you are. You know who they are. And that's because it was ingrained in you from a very basic point. Do you think that it would make a difference if that happened? If at primary school levels, for example, you know who your ward representative is, you know what they ought to be doing, you have a genuine understanding of how processes work. Do you think then it would make it easier then for you to then be involved in the process later on in life, or at least then be able to make demands of those people who are in leadership positions?
Yeah, I think that would be the ideal situation. Like the civic education ought to be introduced early. Yeah.
What about you, David?
Yeah. Well, you're right, and it will make a difference. If you think about today, where do we teach values? and I think there's nowhere. It's not in school. In school, you have to pass chemistry and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
It's not at home.
Not at home, because most of the times we are not there, and actually most of the time the guys who are at home at age 25 are on the phone. They're born with the phone in the hand. There's religion, because a lot of people go to church, but that's spiritual. It's not necessarily values of who am I and who am I to the community. So, and if you recognize that there's people who have captured the political system, the less people know, the happier we will be. So even in at a time of campaign, the people campaigning promise everything other than what they're supposed to do, because it's easier to say, I'll build a road. It's easier to say, I brought a school, and to actually use our money called CDF to do that.
Yeah.
So the people listening then understand that the job of the MP is to bring the CDF to build a
Build a
It's
school.
cool.
And from the young people, that even as young as 10 years old, they understand this. And they also live, they see the corruption and the bad practice around. Somebody was telling me he met an 11-year-old boy. And at that time, people are sort of thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Yeah.
Most people want to be doctors or neurosurgeons or pilot. Nowadays, Mutula Kilonzo.
Yep.
But this young boy wanted to be a policeman. And he specifically wants to be a traffic policeman. And he explained that he already knows half the job, because he knows how much to demand for each offense. He knows that a smooth tire is 4,000 shillings. He actually, that's what he knows, that a traffic policeman's job is to collect money from people who
offenses.
have made offenses. Now, you imagine that how many do we have at that age? Below 15. It's 15 million. It is 1/3 of our population thinking like that.
Yeah.
So yes, early training, early teaching in values, and the values and relationship with one another. How do we live with the neighbor? What is my community? Because you start with your family as the closest community. Then you have the community that you live with, and then you have the bigger community, which is the country. And I hope that one day we can also be calling Africa our greater community as Africans. We need to do that teaching, and it needs to start from very early.
Sure.
I'm sure we'll all agree that there's need for, even as we're talking about vetting the candidates now, there's need to holding them accountable post-election. And as the candidates are signing all these pledges, the Kwajibika pledge, who is signing a pledge to keep them, to hold them accountable beyond the election? Because I feel that there ought to be another pledge that as you're signing this pledge that you're going to do A, B, C, D, I'm also signing another pledge that I am going to make sure that I'm active, that I'm looking, I am holding you accountable to the pledges that you've made.
So the word kuwajibika is very interesting. Kuwajibika is accountability. But wajibu is responsibility. So we are saying there are two people involved here. There is the MP or the MC, the representative, who must be accountable, but the people also have wajibu of holding the candidates or the MPs accountable. And what Tugutuke will do is create the administration that will enable the people to hold the MP accountable. So Tugutuke will create the monitoring and performance monitoring system. We have designed, but not yet been able to create the civic technology that will enable this to happen online, so that it does not have to be physical meetings. So that the pledge, for a start, will be signed publicly and also be available publicly to the public to see all the time, whether it is the constituents or all Kenyans. For meetings between the MP and the residents or the constituents to be either physical or also virtual. COVID taught us that we can do a lot of things virtually.
Yes.
So that we will have an office, a secretariat, that is helping the people monitor that is asking the MP what happened to your meeting that he was due to be in March.
Yep.
When are you having it? And if you find that the MP is trailing on their performance, and it is publicly visible because it's on the platform, then the Tugutuke begins the process of getting the resignation. But the more important person here really is the citizen, because we have to take the responsibility. And earlier you had asked whether the young people are really interested. And in my view, they absolutely are. It's just that they haven't the means by which to express their interest.
Right.
They are very concerned about corruption. And first of all, corruption assumes something which the younger population completely don't seem to live with, which is hierarchy. Young guys don't recognize this is my senior. If I want to talk to Trump, I'll tweet him and he'll tweet back.
Exactly.
If I'm annoyed with Uhuru, I'll tweet him, although nowadays he doesn't tweet back.
Yeah.
But so why this system? And so who are you in this life to demand that because you are some job, I should give you money? That asks the younger population more than we imagine. But it's the question of how do they deal with it? What's the opportunity? What's the method by which we can deal with it? When we started talking with this group of the Tugutuke, it is they who have driven it, and they are not. I don't think I have seen any of them in a political rally yet. So they once you see that there's a thing that you can do, I believe
you participate. If a platform is provided, they participate.
Yes.
We thank you very much, Judie and David, for joining us today, for telling us about this movement. How can one join the movement? Quickly, in 10 seconds.
Tugutuke.com.
That's it.
Yeah. And the movement is not necessarily a physical meeting of everybody. If you believe in what Tugutuke is saying, spread the word.
Tugutuke.com.
Yeah.
David Kabeberi and Judie Wangu are advisors of the Tugutuke movement, and saying it's about time that citizens take the reins of leadership.